Reflecting on the last decade is definitely pertinent as we cast forward to those decades that are yet to come. We've had a war in Ukraine, which is ongoing, of course, the global pandemic, escalating competition dynamics, which are especially sharp here in the Indo-Pacific. All of these things have made it very clear that we do need to revisit our strategic and operational concepts. We've got slow, diligent, but often overly bureaucratised acquisition processes. We have export regimes established in and designed for the last century, and frameworks for defence and national security collaboration that really need to adapt to the times. And while there is much change, there are also inescapable realities that accompany any war, past, present or future. It is in essence a human endeavour, and human capacity can be decisive. So the central questions of this panel that we have today are not easy ones to answer. They are questions that I think we've all been grappling with in our own ways for quite some time, but that luxury of time is evaporating. So there is a new sense of urgency, I think, to this conversation. So very lucky for me and for all of us today that we could not have a more qualified panel to help us discuss these issues. General Yamazaki, Admiral Kumar, Admiral Aquilino, Admiral Sabenki, and Vice Admiral Topshi. You've had a quick intro. Again, these are gentlemen that require no introduction from me. Thanks for joining me, and let's get straight into it. I'm going to ask my first question to two of you, and I will start, if I could please, with Admiral Kumar. Same question for both of you. What do new commercial and military capabilities mean for the maritime domain? Is there a risk that our oceans could become transparent? And what capabilities are you seeing that you think have the potential to be genuine game changers? Admiral Kumar, if I could ask you to go first, please.
There has been a lot of technological innovation that has been happening. We see it in the Ukraine war as well. As far as the maritime domain is concerned, all the developments in space-based surveillance, communications, the improved maritime domain awareness. So these are the areas where substantial improvements are happening. So what does a commander at sea want? He's like in the case of the military commander who wants to see over the hill as to what is there. We are interested in seeing what is beyond the horizon. So for that, we find a host of technologies that are available now in the commercial field. Be it AIS, be it long range IT and space-based surveillance, electro-optics, and LND. So all sorts of technology is now available, and this helps you in developing a picture at sea. Now you may ask as to whether is it going to make it completely transparent so that you're able to have a complete picture. I think it's quite a tough call for various reasons, because one, the oceans are quite large, and the spaces that we need to cover are substantial, and for which you will require a large number of space-based assets and all sorts of surveillance gear is required for that. So there's a cost to it. And secondly, in the maritime domain, unlike on land, you're always moving. So you find the vessels are always are mobile, and therefore you'll have to keep track of it in a real-time manner. Then of course there is also the issue of, even if you locate it, what are the intent? You may get the position, you may get the disposition, the movement, etc., but you are unable to establish what is the intent of it. And also, whenever a technology is developed, you always find there is a counter to it. Mm-hmm. So, especially we see in this Ukraine war that when a technology is brought into the battlefield within a few days, now it gets countered. So therefore, stealth, deception, and those sort of things are brought in. Communication, satellite communication is another area where we find that we can get near real-time information. There is great bandwidth now, and in fact, you get an overload of information at sea. And I would only like to say that there's an old saying that if of what avail is the loaded tube or the gun or the shell, if communication fails, then the fleet will go to hell. So it's very important to harness the technology that is available and see that you are networked, and while there are you'll find it getting countered by your adversary, you have to have the ability to be resilient and to learn and to improve and stay a step ahead.
Yeah, some excellent points there. Particularly liked the way that you brought in that older concepts do not become irrelevant just because new technologies enter the fray. And I think deception is a concept that we haven't thought about very hard for a long time. Admiral Key, may I ask you for a UK perspective on this?
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts on this. I think some of the biggest game-changing technologies we're going to see in the contemporary battle space are not overtly and obviously military in the first place. Speaking as a sailor, one of the things that we're watching very interesting is the shift to green fuels. Shipping has got to make that leap forward in order to meet our obligations under climate change and sustainability. And the nature of those fuels is very different from the ones we use today. Fuel densities are different. The way in which they're transported around the world and stored is different, and the manner in which they're going to be used on board ships are different. The same we're seeing with green fuels, with some of the exploratory stuff in the air domain, and at some point we'll do it in the land. So I think sometimes we tend to get too focused in on what are the military technologies that are changing, whereas actually the real game changers sit in the broader commercial space that will impact upon us, and the speed at which we can adapt to that sort of thinking in many ways will define where or how we retain operational advantage, because we're not immune from the same pace and speed of development that everybody else is. If I was to compare last century to this and previously, a lot of the technology advances made in the military space were the preserve of governments, because the threshold for entry was very high, it was very expensive. An aircraft carrier is an expensive piece of kit. Tanks have a unique purpose in the land domain. Now, the things that are really shaping our world, those thresholds for entry are actually retained in the large commercial organizations or in the SMEs that don't recognize the traditional boundaries. And so for us to shift our mindset into that area will determine the sorts of technologies, I think, that will most affect whether or not we can continue to prevail in the contemporary battle space.
Yeah, thank you very much for bringing that sort of focus in on commercial technologies and the impact that has in the military domain. General Yamazaki, I would like to come to you now. So, do you think that we need to assume that there's a possibility or reality that all military communications can be intercepted, interfered with, and potentially even manipulated for operational effect in conflict? Is that the case already? And are we too reliant on technology at the moment in military operations?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for asking that question.
現在のこのバトルフィールド戦いというものは、今まで伝統的な従来領域である陸海空の領域に宇宙サイバー電磁波のまた認知領域の戦いも含めたこのクロスドメインのマルティラテラルのドメインの戦い方になっております。
The battlefield right now, it is adding to the traditional, conventional domains such as land, sea, and air. Now we're in the outer space, cyber, as well as electromagnetic spectrum, and then cognitive domains that we are actually engaged in. Therefore, warfare is now becoming more cross-domain and multi-domain.
その作戦を遂行するための指揮通信の確保というのは極めて重要であります。その一方のところで、このアドバーサリー側から見ると、それを通信を傍受したり妨害をしたりということが、当然考えられますし、現在もサイバーのアタックも含めて行われていると認識しています。
So, in that regard, to operate in those all domains, C2 system and then military communication is critically important. Therefore, obviously, our adversaries is actually conducting the interception as well as the interference already, and then including cyber attack as well.
宇宙の領域につきましても、宇宙のサテライトを使用したこの宇宙領域を活用したこのコミュニケーションの活用というものがとても今は重要になっていますし、その宇宙の領域においてもそのような傍受であるとか妨害であるとか、さらには物理的な破壊ということも行われているかもしれません。
So, in outer space, now we're making full use of the outer space domain, including the satellite and so forth. And then those communication in the outer space is becoming increasingly important. So adversaries is actually conducting interception and then interference as well. And they're also, I believe, intending to physically attack and destroy the satellite as well.
これから重要なことは、指揮通信はさらに重要性を増すということであり、また我々についての防衛力もその分野について重点的にビルドアップしていきますけれども、この技術を使いながら保全をしていく、またリジリエンスを保っていく、どんな状況においても指揮通信が確保する手段を確保し、そのような防衛力整備を実施をし、フィールドで活用していくということだと思います。
So, Japan has put emphasis on further expanding our and then enhancing our capability and capacity and the C2 system and then military communication. That is becoming increasingly important. Therefore, we will build up tremendously in this technology. And then as we are enhancing that capability, it is important to also ensure the security as well as resiliency. That means we must ensure all the military communication C2 system in any cases that needs to be functional and capable. And as we are making full use of such kind of technology and then C2 capabilities, that we are enhancing our own defense capability and capacity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Resilience and redundancy are really key words as we think about all capabilities, but particularly information ones. Vice Admiral Topshi, can we trust the information that we're getting, and how secure are our comms and our information networks?
So I would agree with the General that I think the history teaches us that our communications can be intercepted, and we should never assume that they're completely secure. I think the other thing is that we have achieved the remarkable feat of simultaneously over-classifying information and under-classifying it. We have a tendency to make everything, put it at the highest level of protection and make it extremely difficult to declassify and share with our allies and partners. And at the same time, when you look at our logistics information, a lot of it is unclassified and with big data can easily be aggregated. I also don't think we've put enough thought into exactly the question of spoofing and deception, and so because we will default to trusting an information if it appears to be coming from a correct source. And so today, and what differentiates the human from the algorithm is we have to be willing to step back and say, why do I believe this? Is there any reason why I should doubt it? And how am I sure that this is correct? And again, back to the long-standing principles of mission command. Yeah. Do I understand my commander's intent? And when I get information that seems to be against that or doesn't seem to be achieving our aim, how do I question it effectively and be sure that it's accurate?
Yes, superb. Thank you. That's excellent. Admiral Aquilino, I think you thought you were getting away with it there for a while and flying under the radar. But can I ask you to please explain how you are thinking at Indo-PACOM about managing AI-enabled autonomous and robotic systems in terms of operational decision-making. So is human in the loop the way to go, human on the loop, maybe more efficient perhaps? What's the right human-machine teaming approach? And then can I ask you to not only talk about the way that you're thinking about that, but the way that you understand that our competitors and potential adversaries are thinking about that too?
So as we think through the ability to plug technologies in, and what does that mean in the space specifically with AI, machine learning, let's not lose sight of the fact that there is a human dimension to warfare. We have the ability, and we've had it, if you were to go over time, from the first medieval battle with oil poured over the top of the drawbridge to where we are today, these group of people have been integrating technology into our warfare capabilities for centuries. So how do we do it? I think, certainly from the United States perspective, and always in concert with our allies and partners, I think the benefit of the AI machine learning in the near term is focused around decision superiority. Yeah. So when I go to my ops center and I look at the picture and I have high confidence that I know where everything is in the battle space, my forces, my partner's forces, and any potential adversary forces, and I can act at the speed of war and relevance in real time, that's how we're thinking about integrating it into our current models. And I'm extremely thankful for my secretary working towards the delivery of those capabilities and the continued refinement and betterment of it. Now, that said, let's never lose sight of the human interaction and where that sits. So if you were to ask all my partners, they would describe the term operational art. So when there's a problem that we have to take on, and we think through the various courses of action, what vulnerabilities exist, what advantages exist, and we develop our plan forward, boy, there's a real human piece to that we have not yet, nor do I see in the near term, that we'll be able to offload that to an algorithm or some other type of technology. Now, at some point, maybe. I just don't see it in the near term. So leveraging all those capabilities to the best way possible to inform our operations and our actions, I think that's the current way that, at least at Indo-PACOM, we're looking at it. And I'll end with, certainly tied into our allies and partners, right? Oh, by the way, allies and partners, the people sitting on the stage are my friends that I've known for years. Mm-hmm. So the sharing of that information, the ability for them to pick up the phone and say, hey, you need to think about this a little differently. How are we going to synchronize it better? That happens all the time. General Yamazaki's got me on speed dial, and he has no problem telling me when I have to be recaged. And I value everyone's counsel. Opinions, they matter, and they make us better.
That's an excellent response. Did anybody else want to offer a thought on that? And perhaps is there any difference between the way that we, the people on this stage, are thinking about the problem, and perhaps to use US parlance, pacing competitors, China and Russia, are thinking about using technology in the same problem?
I'll leap back to the first part of that question rather than how are our adversaries using it, because we're not entirely sure we know, because the algorithms that they're using in a kind of human dimension are built against a perspective and a view of the world that is different to ours. So one of the challenges we always set ourselves is to understand our adversary and trying to get into their mind, because their rationality will and can look different to ours. But just picking up on Admiral Aquilino's point about sharing perspectives, the AI will give us data crunching far quicker than we can consume as individual human beings, the amount of information that is out there. It can allow us to detect patterns. It can allow us to look for rustling in the leaves in a way that is so much harder for us to do as human beings. But what it can't do is then bring in that same amount of intuitive risk tolerance that a commander is prepared to take, set against an opportunity or a downside. It can't very quickly judge, and you can see this from the way that the machine learning going into autonomous cars is taking this at the moment, that how it reads for the fallibility of other human beings, it tries to calculate that as a percentage odd. And that's all it can go on. Whereas what we're working on is relationships built over time and trust, built over time, founded on trust, which allows us then to understand that whilst the number might say this, we know that actually the instinct and the judgment is going to be over here. And until you've written an algorithm that can manage and reflect human emotion, then I think you will always find it very difficult to take a command role out of warfare decision making.
General Topshi and Admiral Kumar, I'd like to ask you both this question if I could. We're starting to see more agile coalitions and partnerships develop, and these are happening in both formal and informal ways, often built on common problems and shared interests, which seems like a pretty good response to a fast-moving and a changing world. Can I ask for your views on how you see the rise of minilaterals and these focused groupings contributing both to deterrence and to warfare in the 21st century?
It's an interesting challenge because Canada, as a country with a relatively small military, often we're always working with allies and partners. And we have the full spectrum of alliances, from the only binational alliance in the world in NORAD through to a series of almost ad hoc exercises with the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force and the Indian Navy. So I think what's absolutely important is the opportunity to interact with other navies, to understand the differences in language, that even if we share English in common, we can still fail to communicate. And when you add an extra language, it becomes even more difficult. Yet fundamentally, naval operations are the same. And so I think as we go forward and we try and think through what does deterrence look like in practice, it's the proven ability to actually get together as navies from perhaps as few as 2 nations, but ideally more, and demonstrate that ability to work together, to develop a shared understanding of the situation. And most importantly, picking up on the last 2 points, the confidence that we should speak honestly to each other, and when someone says something that we just don't think is right, we're willing to say, yeah, I don't agree, I have a different perspective on that, and listen to each other so that we actually develop the best understanding of the situation.
Excellent, thank you. Admiral Kumar, could you please add your thoughts from an Indian perspective? You've certainly been growing the number of partners that you're working with. How are these contributing, and what is your perspective on how they contribute to deterrence and potentially to the conduct of warfare?
Yeah, sure. You're aware that in the maritime domain, the challenges are just not traditional or non-traditional. It is also a problem for all of us. It's transnational, I would say. And therefore, the challenges cannot be addressed individually by any nation. So therefore, there is a need for cooperation. And in fact, the US Navy in 2015 had talked of 1,000-ship Navy, including all the friendly partner navies, coming together. So that is something we in the maritime domain always look forward to find how to cooperate, how to work together. So while doing this, I would say that today we are looking at issue-based convergences. So we may not agree on certain things, but we'll agree on many other issues. So therefore we come together on those matters. For example, India's we come together on the climate change matters. All of us don't, but when we do come together, India is leading the International Solar Alliance and so on. So the same way we are looking at regional solutions to regional problems. So there are groupings like we have the IONS, Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, which has got 25 partner countries and 8 observers. Also there is the Colombo Security Conclave, there is the Goa Maritime Conclave, and so on. So when we work in smaller groups, it serves a lot of purposes. For example, it generates a lot of trust amongst the partner countries. Then you work towards building capacity. It results in increased interoperability, better domain awareness, regular engagements, and all this is what finally leads to maritime security. So there's a saying that a rising tide lifts all boats, and so therefore we look at prospering together. India as a country looks at everybody in the region prospering together. So therefore we work on the principle of the 5 S's. We say Samman, which is respect in Hindi. That means you deal with each other with respect. Everybody has a seat at the table, irrespective of your size or where you stand. Then Samvad, which is dialogue. That means you engage in conversation. Sahyog, cooperation. Shanti or peace, and all this translates into prosperity or samriddhi. So that is the way we we look at it, and Prime Minister has clearly given us the vision of Saga, that is security and growth for all in the region. So that sort of underlines what we do at sea.
My next question I'm going to direct, please, to Admiral Aquilino and General Yamazaki. I want to ask about the particular context of, again, coming back to human-centric warfare and to human capability. When we think about the military approaches that I think we all have on this stage, we really do put a high premium on life, on the preservation of life, and on the capacity of humans to make a empowered decision-making. It's part of our system. Having said that, being a little bit provocative here, do we still actually need to put humans on aircraft carriers and maritime strike groups? Are we going to get to a point where we can project force without having to put our most prized assets in the danger that we do have to in our operational concepts today?
現在の戦いがAI またロボティクス、また無人化の能力の向上によって戦闘場面が変わっており、それを使うことによって我々の大切な兵士の命を守り、また戦闘行動においても、警戒監視 ISR またターゲティングにおいてもより良い戦闘ができるということで、あります。
Well, the current warfare, fully utilizing the AI and then robotech, as well as the unmanned and then capability and so forth. And these are the absolutely critical technology to save lives, and then those soldiers' lives matters. Therefore, we are utilizing this kind of technology in battle space in order to have more effective ISL and targeting as well.
そのような一方において、現在の戦闘というものについては、すべてのこのポリティカルのレベル、またストラテジック、オペレーショナル、タクティクスのレベルが、そのすべてのレイヤーが整合性が図られ、また一国のみではその法と秩序の戦いを遂行することができないという観点においては、同盟国また同志国との連携がさらに必要になってきます。
At the same time, that current warfare requires the all multiple layered synchronization among the pole mill region, as well as strategic, operational, and then tactical aspect at the same time. And that also that a single country alone cannot fight to protect the international rule-based order. Therefore, it is necessary to closely align with allies and then partners and then like-minded countries as well.
戦場が複雑化し、またその領域横断作戦が遂行される中において、意思決定をいち早くし、そしてこの 政治からそのタクティクスのレベルまで全てが整合が図らなければいけないというのが我々が直面している現代の戦いであります。
So in the battle space today is very complex and then it becoming increasingly multi and then cross domain, and then it requires the very quick decision making process. Therefore, it is necessary to fully synchronize the from the politics level down to the tactical level. Therefore, this kind of synchronization is required in our battle space now.
これからはそのような作戦環境下の中において、この対応するためにはこの、人間のその能力とやはりプラスしてその、この革新的な技術を融合させたコンビネーションがとても大事だと思います。
Therefore, in such a complex battle space and an operational environment, obviously human capacity and capability matters. However, we need to obviously adding the all those innovative technology to allow us to effectively conduct this kind of operation and capability to be fully utilized.
で最後に、そういう面におきまして私はトム幕僚長としてですねとても大事なこの同盟国また同志国キャンベル大使もそちらに座っておりますけれどもこの同志国との連携というのを常にコミュニケーションを取っています。
And also, as the Joint Chief of Staff of Japan's Joint Staff, that I put utmost emphasis on close alignment with ally and like-minded countries. And here in this venue, actually, my one of the trusted counterpart, General Campbell, is here. So I always consider that close communication with those counterpart and network of our level is very much critically important.
最後にその分野とやはりクリティカルな革新的技術を導入をした AI 化、ロボット化、アンマンドの能力の構築にも重点的にこの防衛力整備をしたいと思っています。
Therefore, in this regard, and all those domains and areas that I would like to, and then our force will further strengthening the that critical innovative technology, including AI, robotics, as well as the unmanned capability to fundamentally strengthen and reinforce our defense capacity and capability.
Thank you. That was a very comprehensive answer, very insightful, Admiral Aquilino. A quick thought from you, perhaps. How far does autonomy and robotics take us? What is the contribution that it can make to keeping our people safe?
So let me just make sure I got the question right. Will there be unmanned carrier strike groups and warfighting formations in the future? Is kind of absolutely not. There would never be a Top Gun 3 if we went down that path.
I was looking forward to it.
So while there's a technology piece of that, there's a cultural piece of that, there's a command and control piece of that. Again, I think at some point, if I were to project far into the future, that certainly is a possibility. We do have to break the cultural aspects of it. But I'm here to tell you right now, my forces are operating with unmanned undersea, on the sea, and above the sea capabilities as we sit here, as are my partners. So it's closer to us than we think. We have to make sure that we are able to understand the meaning. We have to be able to execute through the rule of law. And as we weave in these technologies, what does that mean for our ops? As you articulated, we certainly have concern for human life. Not every nation on the earth has concern for human life. I can say unequivocally that the group of leaders on this stage, it is the number one thing that comes across our mind when we execute our exercises, operations every day, right? With the goal of bringing every one of those soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, Coast Guardsmen, Guardians, back home to mom, dad, and the kids is the very first thought in everyone's head up here. So we treat it very seriously, and we will continue to figure out how to weave in these technologies that in some cases help preserve life, but in other cases have a different effect.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
So we have to make sure, we understand the magnitude, the consequences, the risk, to Admiral Key's point.
Yep.
In the end, technology's technology, leadership matters for everything. And again, I'm very thankful to be with my partners because every one of these leaders on the stage is working with us every day to deliver a free and open Indo-Pacific.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much. It's clear that we do not have the industrial capacity for large-scale warfare that we might need, and we might need it sooner than we want to face that. Is the answer to supply and supply chain challenges more sovereign capability? Is it friendshoring? Is it homeshoring? How do we rapidly scale up our industrial capability and be ready for what might be coming?
I think there are two things that any member of any nation would want, that is to live in peace and to prosper. And so the role of government must be to provide the security of the nation so that economic growth can take place, and that enables prosperity. And if peace is assured, then there are a number of economic models proven over history that will allow prosperity, much of which is detached from the role of government. What we've seen over time through history throughout is that if peace is not assured, then increasingly government needs to, or the nation needs to take control of its broader manufacturing base. And I think we're going through a really interesting period at the moment where what we're seeing in the Ukraine war currently is a real question about whether or not the relationship between the state and the defense industrial base or the economic or the agricultural base is as secure as it needs to be. And maybe we need to consider a shift in that relationship, because the seduction of the just enough, just in time economic model, which allows you to do more across a wider range of opportunities, actually looks pretty fragile when you reach into a pocket to discover that the assumptions that you've developed for what war will look like prove to be wrong. And I think it's beholden upon us as military leaders to engage across with our industrial, commercial, and government colleagues to work out whether the model we've got at the moment is actually in the right place. And that is bringing into it conversations about national resilience. And I see that, here we are in India, very supportive of their Made in India position, where Prime Minister Modi has been very clear that maybe it is time for India to consider again what resilience looks like. I don't read from that anything other, as my good friend Harry Kumar has said. India is reaching out for partnerships, but it is also making sure that it is personally resilient. And I think that's the sort of conversations we're all being forced into as we look at a far more complex and uncertain world.
Wonderful, excellent answer. Thank you so much. We are extremely close to being out of time, but can I throw, please, to the young fellows, Raisina, young fellows, and just take one question, I think perhaps for our panel.
Very much to the panelists. I have a question on critical undersea infrastructure. So roughly 95% of communications and data travels through undersea cables. And it's a really complex field, with cables being owned by a combination of private and state-owned entities. So we wanted to ask you about the options for cooperation on protecting such infrastructure. What are your views on the viable fora for cooperation regionally and globally, and especially considering the heavy investments of actors such as China in strategic locations, such as Gwadar Port in Pakistan, for example?
Let's go one more.
My question is to do with the global transition away from fossil fuels and what implications that will have on how militaries operate, because that shift is not often factored in our thinking about the future of warfare in academic scholarship. So my question is twofold. So how are we going to operate, deter, and defend within net zero constraints in a few decades? What does it mean for the capabilities we need to be developing already today? And because you've mentioned green fuel, so what does it mean for how can we avoid interoperability challenges with allies and partners if our militaries don't move at the same speed and level of ambition on the road to net zero? Thank you.
Admiral Key, I think you had touched on that last question yourself previously. Did you want to start?
Yeah, so we're all citizens of the planet, and therefore we have an absolute obligation to look after the wonderful Earth in which we're privileged to live, and certainly, therefore, speaking for the United Kingdom and the Royal Navy, our commitment to reflect those obligations is really clear. The two patrol vessels we've got operating in the Indo-Pacific region at the moment, HMS Spey and HMS Tamar, are the greenest ships we've ever built. Now, they're still running on marine diesel, but we've ensured that in many ways we are minimizing their carbon footprint. And the engine spaces are designed to really embrace emerging technologies as they develop. And the global shipping industry is really wrestling with this. And it has to wrestle with it in a holistic fashion, because quite soon we will find, and I'm talking years rather than months, we'll find that some nations will make determinations about whether or not you can use their ports, how you can operate in their waters if you are not reflecting some of the obligations we have. And of course, across the Pacific region and through the Indo-Pacific region are another number of countries who are affected by climate change impact far more than they are by some of the contested activity that is going on territorially around the world. So we are obliged to play into this space because it's going to impact how we operate into the future and where we operate. And so we have to weave that through in everything. It's not discretionary for us just because we happen to be operating in military services.
Thank you very much. Did anyone? Yes, please. Thank you.
For the challenge of undersea infrastructure, undersea cables, pipelines, and everything else, it becomes very simple if you know who has done what, where. And so I think the first challenge for all of us is to just make sure we have a better understanding of what infrastructure does exist under the waters. And there's an incredible collection of different sensors and organizations, including a lot in the science and education community, that are able to track and understand activity on the water and under the water. And so I think the first place in any of that is to try and find a way to better understand the data that we do have, recognize that now that there is a potential threat there that's been realized in the case of Nord Stream 1 and 2. And so how do we create a method that allows us to understand what has happened and provide credibility so that it is believed when we assess that it is this person, this country, this actor has done this. And that's the starting place for action.
Yeah, there's 2 points to that, though, right? So that's an after it happens thing.
Yeah.
The actions that have to go into account before it happens to protect it is really where we need to be focused, and we can learn a lot from each other. But there's a second part of this that's really concerning to me, and that is, there are nations out there that are willing to target critical infrastructure, civilians, as a part of gray zone or first steps in the time of crisis or conflict that is different than we've seen in the past. And we need to understand that that's a possibility, whether it's shutting off water, taking other actions against our population's critical infrastructure, fuel distribution. Again, there's a long list. We ought to understand that there are nations out there willing to target and take action against our civilians as a part of their plan. And that's concerning to me. So I think, like everything else, our teams working together, we can put in place resiliency, redundancy, flexibility, and protections to ensure we're protecting our people.
Okay. Well, that's a terrific place to end. Please thank this wonderful panel for a great conversation. Thank you for your frankness.